The last thing any of us as salespeople want to do is to go find ourselves working for a company with a horrible culture. I mean, the commission could be great. It could be a great location. They could have cool amenities, but if the culture is toxic, they don't have empathy towards their employees or empathy towards prospects, or if it's one of those places where there's lack of accountability, there are no checks and balances, and the leadership is just out of whack, I wouldn't want to work there, and you wouldn't want to work there either. And this is why it's imperative that leaders understand this concept and we create an environment where our team members want to come day in and day out. In this episode, we're going to tackle that topic, give you an idea of how you can build a strong culture of empathy and accountability. This episode is brought to you in part by Audible. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and go to audibletrial.com/TSE and get one free book and a 30-day free trial. Again, audibletrial.com/TSE. This episode is also brought to you in part by TSE Certified Sales Training Program. If you're a sales leader looking for a tool to help your sales reps find better prospects, have more meaningful conversation, and learn how to ask more powerful questions, and ultimately close more deals, we encourage you to check out TSE Certified Sales Training Program. The first 2 modules are absolutely free. You can find more information at thesalesevangelist.com/free course. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist podcast. I'm your host, Donald Kelly, the Sales Evangelist, and I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And on this episode, we're going to talk about a sales tool that's quite not a traditional sales tool. It's not a software for sure, and it's not something that you physically have within the office, but it's something that leadership must have in order to have an effective organization. That's empathy and accountability. And on today's episode, I have an amazing guest. His name is Justin Dauer, and he is a multifaceted, multi-pierced, multi-tattooed designer, author, and speaker. He wrote the celebrated book, Cultivating a Creative Culture. He's also the vice president of human-centered design and development at BSwift. It's a CVS Health company. Now, understanding all of this, he comes with a wealth of knowledge. And on today's episode, he's going to break down to us what we can do to make sure we have those 2 important things as we develop our teams, grow our company, and just create an organization where people actually want to come to. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Thanks, Donald. Good to be here.
Oh, man, I'm so excited to have you. And I look forward to chatting with you about this idea of I've been having empathy, a culture of empathy and accountability. Because no matter what you're doing, no matter what if you're listening to this podcast, what organization you work in, you must have effective accountability, but still you must have empathy. And I want to be able to learn a little bit more about that and get some ideas of what you have done and what you recommend people do. But before we hit up on all the good stuff there, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and what you do, Justin?
Certainly. I am currently in my 9-to-5 job, the vice president of human-centered design at a SaaS healthcare and benefits management firm called BSwift, who is owned by CVS Health. And I lead the human-centered design team there. We are in-house and we work on our suite of products. And when I am not at my 9-to-5 job, I write books. I wrote a book called Cultivating a Creative Culture, where I do a lot of public speaking around that as well. So this topic that we're going to be talking about today is very near and dear to me, about talking about humility and empathy and accountability. So I really couldn't be more excited to dive in.
All right. So let's go right at the top. One of the problems, why did you even consider doing a book around this or discussing or create content around a subject like this in the first place?
Certainly. So I had worked, and throughout my entire career, I've either worked in like agency side or tech side primarily. And I had worked, I had been a creative director on the agency side for maybe over 10 years. And there's something specific about agency culture that really tends to burn people out. I mean, certainly there are places that do it right. I don't want to make a blanket statement, but that was kind of the driving factor. There, just about people's value being perceived by who the last one out the door is, or just kind of someone has to leave to pick up their kid, or someone has a doctor's appointment, and someone kind of tapping on their wristwatch and saying, you have a half day today, or little passive aggressive things like that. And it was a buildup. And I wrote an article for a popular web design e-zine called A List Apart about the agency space specifically. And the feedback I got was cross media, actually. It was from people in newspaper and online and radio and even television writing and saying, man, this really resonated with me beyond the context of the agency space. So I knew there was a topic that was more about the human experience instead of the agency experience. So I put an outline together and I wrote a book on the topic.
Very interesting. My wife worked at an agency, and one of the things she saw was that same exact idea you're saying, right? That it was end of the day, she had responsibilities and community stuff that she was taking care of, but it was viewed as lazy because she left work when she was supposed to leave work.
Right. Yeah.
It was sad. People got burned out.
Yeah, sadly that there's a connection to be made there very often when I bring this topic up, like you just said with your wife, where you mention the agency space and someone will chuckle and shake their head and say, oh man, I have a story to tell about this too. And it's a way for us to connect, but at the same time, it's kind of unfortunate. This is something that so many people can connect on.
Yeah. So here's the thought now. Let's think about this from organizational standpoint. What are some of the very first things? Let's go back to the burnout. What are some of the effects? You mentioned burnout. Are there any other effects that will happen as a natural byproduct from a company or organization having that quote unquote agency effect? And again, some folks are not working in an agency. You're probably working in all types of business listening to this episode, but I'm sure that thing still applies. But what would you say are some of the other detriments or effects that will happen as a natural byproduct?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times in the agency space, it's about, clearly it's about making money. So somebody being a name on a spreadsheet rather than being viewed as an individual. So just cranking out work. I remember I would come in the morning when I was in less senior positions, and there would just be a stack of papers or printouts on my desk of my work with marked up in red lines and saying this. And my value for the day was to blow through that work, quality be damned, and just get it out the door. So there is something there about, what about pausing for a moment? I remember, if someone was, God forbid, had 5 minutes of spare time and they wanted to look at Facebook, or they wanted to just read, I don't know, the CNN or something like that. And you would see people leaning forward, against their computer screens and kind of hunched over, like blocking their screen because if their supervisor walked by and saw that they were on Facebook, it'd be, why aren't you working? Don't you have something to do? And, so that is a burnout as well. I mean, there's certainly cranking through work and being more assembly line than having a value for crafting something, but you're constantly on edge. You're constantly worried about, am I going to get terminated because somebody feels like I don't have enough work to do? Of course, there's enough work to do, but as a human being, we all need time to pause and recalibrate. And just having that, that 5 seconds or 5 minutes that you're seeking be under the sword of Damocles, I mean, that really wears you down.
Yeah. And I also feel like, like you said, if the cost of hiring people over and over again, it's definitely going to take a toll, and morale is going to be out the window. So people are not going to want to work as hard. They're not going to have that dedication, and it's just not going to be there. So let's put you're a sales manager or a business owner. He or she is listening to this episode and they say, oh my goodness, I can't believe I've seen the same thing. I did the same thing was done to me, and I'm doing the same thing right now to my team. What should we do? Let's start some steps you think we should do to address this and to fix it. And then we could dissect and go into each of them. Does that sound fair enough?
It certainly does. And I'm glad you started there at the top, because at the top is exactly where this begins. This is all about action rather than lip service. The being demonstrative of respect and humility. We talked about, we're talking about empathy and accountability. Humility is, the beautiful thing about humility is that it's baked into both across empathy and accountability. Humility, if a leader makes a mistake, you own that mistake, and then you immediately follow up with an action plan. So, you're not pointing a finger, or you're not calling someone into your office with your Herman Miller chair and, you're putting your feet up on your desk and you're cracking your knuckles and you're like, we have to talk. It's more about a conversation. It's a dialogue. It's a two-way street. It's less oration and delegation. It's more collaboration at that point. You're bringing someone along from the ride. If you made a mistake, this is how we're going to address it. Or I made a mistake. This is how I'm going to address it. That is the accountability aspect. So there is certainly, I wrote a book on culture, and there are little people have, if they work in a high stress environment, they'll have pockets of culture where they'll kind of gather, or they'll gather in the kitchen for a little bit, and they'll talk about something related to their craft or something that they read online. But really saturating the culture from the top. So people, it's a known quantity that people will be, if they made a mistake, that there's a culture of support, that there is that accountability where people will rally around them and help them improve. Or in an empathy aspect, we talked about, I said earlier, somebody tapping their wristwatch and saying half day today. Maybe someone is a caregiver in their house. Maybe they have to, like I said, maybe they're a single parent and the buck stops with them and they have to pick up their child. Not even batting an eyelash at that point when somebody has to leave, and trusting them that they've gotten their work done. I mean, that simple concept of trust is something we might take for granted, but it's not to be taken for granted at all. So really kind of a bloated answer, but it all comes back to, it starts at the top. As leaders, we have to be the ones who are setting the tone.
Hey, we're going to take a quick break, but when we get back, Justin is going to continue sharing with us what we can do to cultivate that culture, an atmosphere where people can feel that they have empathy from their leaders as well as accountability. You're listening to the Sales Evangelist podcast, and I'm your host, Donald Kelly, the Sales Evangelist. As you know, a few days ago was Amazon Prime Day, and my wife and I, we got some toys. One of the toys we got was an Echo. And the cool thing about the Echo Dot is that it connects to my Audible. So like this weekend, I'm sitting here cleaning the house. So you know what I started to do, right? Alexa, play The Power of Habits.
Getting your selection from Audible. Resuming The Power of Habit.
And willing to chat. It was easier to get a cookie.
Now obviously you don't need an Echo to do that. Nor do you have to have Alexa. You just need an Audible account. Simply go to audibletrial.com/TSE. You'll get one free book of your choice, and you'll get a 30-day free trial. One of the books I recommend is The Power of Habits by Charles Duhigg. It is absolutely amazing. Check it out for yourself. Take advantage of the free gift. Go to audibletrial.com/TSE. This episode is also brought to you in part by TSE Certified Sales Training Program. As a young sales rep, I didn't have the proper coaching and guidance that I needed. But fortunately, the company I worked for put me through a training program, and it was legit. My performance was like a hockey stick. It just happened overnight. But to maintain that, I was part of a program that met every single Friday. And I was like, man, that's so legit. That's awesome. What if we had a program like that in the future? And that's where TSE Certified Sales Training comes in. Each week, you go through a module. Do it on your own, at your own pace. About 5 videos. At the end of the week, we come together as a group, and you hear from sellers from different industry who bring different insights based on the content that they digested from the module. It's a really fun group, and I would love to have you join us. Check out the first 2 modules absolutely free. Go to thesalesevangelist.com/free course. Again, thesalesevangelist.com/free course. Hey guys, we're back. Now, as we dive into the second half of this episode, Justin and I are going to pick up where we left off and continue to share with you some concepts that you could take today to help shape a culture that has empathy as well as accountability. So leadership recognizing that, I love what you shared there too, where you have dialogues, you have a two-way conversation with someone. Because I've seen in organizations I've worked in where there's a culture of fostering for growth, where the leaders are really leaders and not just, feel like they're taskmasters. When they found a problem, they came and they asked the question. And from asking that question, what naturally happens is that we are able to have a discussion, and maybe I'm able to reveal something that they didn't see before in the process that we can fix. And I've seen it where I've been in a leadership role where I've had team members share stuff with me that I thought this was the best way of doing it. But because we had a culture of let's discuss and let's talk with each other, next thing you knew, these team members were sharing brilliant ideas that I couldn't have conceived of before, because they're in the trenches and they're able to overcome some of the difficulties in the process and make it so much more efficient. But if we didn't have that culture, an organization don't have that, bye out the window. I'm not going to put my time and effort into this. Have you seen any any situations like that in your role?
Yeah, that's another great point. Say if I'm running a workshop, when you're running a successful workshop, ideally you want people from the C-level to people who are answering the phones in the room, because at that point, hierarchies should be thrown out the window, because everyone's voice has value. Everyone's viewpoint is different. I mean, this is all about inclusion and valuing the individual's voice. So, I mean, to your point, I like to use the workshop analogy because you want all those different stakeholders at varied levels and those different perspectives in the room. And the same thing goes if you're having a conversation with a team member, like you said. Everyone's going to come at something or attack a problem or have a perspective on an issue that we don't have. So again, setting the tone so people feel like they can be heard, or it's that simple thing of raising your hand in a classroom, like being empowered to know that it's okay to maybe have an answer that doesn't fit, or to have an outside viewpoint. So again, this has to be championed from the top, and that level of support cannot be an unknown quantity. It has to be articulated. It has to be clearly available and made known.
Yeah, I really like that. And I agree with you 100% on that. Like it just go back to that. You said the workshop idea. I think can I borrow that and use that too?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
But you think of it as not only we are all learning from each other, we're all learning and growing. I thought that was like really brilliant, and it seems like it works tremendously well. What are the thoughts you think, or any other ideas that we need to be aware of if this manager or this sales leader is trying to figure out ways to create that culture? Anything else that we can do to create that culture within our organization?
Sure. I mean, as a manager or a sales leader, simplicity is a core thing. And this is, I primarily come from the design world, and simplicity is, when we think of like the most intuitive means to engage with designing X product. If something is simple, if there's a clear level of cognitive fluency, and that is the ease of using things, the simpler something is to use, the more likely it is to be engaged with. So simplicity also means clarity. I think of Scott M. Cutlip's 7 C's of communication, and that's been applied to business settings quite a bit. And one of the things is simplicity and clarity, and articulating things so nothing is left to chance. I mean, exactly what you're saying is exactly what you mean. And I think of an example with there's an organization in the UK called Government Digital Services. And they have something where they post this signage on the walls in their office space that says, "It's okay to X." And the interesting thing about that is, I mean, there will always be people at businesses who are the longest tenured, or the founders, been there a dozen years, 15 years. And they know what the business affords in a cultural sense. Like, they know they can go walk around the block or get a coffee and no one's going to scoff at them. And we always have to be cognizant of, as managers or sales leaders, what does a new hire think when they come in? Do they know that they can pause by the coffee machine and talk to their coworkers without somebody scoffing at them and demanding they go back to their desk, either by a side-eye glance or saying something verbatim? Or do they know that it's okay to work somewhere else in the office, that they're not chained to their desk, that they can work on another floor, or they can take their laptop outside or something like that? And the beautiful thing that the government digital services model provides is they put the signage up and they say, it's okay to not check your email after work. It's okay to have an off day. It's okay to pause, like I just said, pause by the coffee machine, or talk to your coworker, ask them how their day is. And again, this seems like it should make perfect sense for someone to do this in a business. But again, it's so often put by the wayside. And the signage is a crystal clear example of what can I take advantage of in this business? What can I do to be the most effective, where I will not lie, I will not be judged, or my efforts, if I have an off day, will not be held against me. So I think that clarity, again, to your original question, is absolutely key, and it has to be articulated from management.
I like that idea, giving a sign, and it's setting the rules before you play the game.
Right.
Can I tell you a story about the situation?
Absolutely.
So I worked in this company, and one of the things that we did, everybody, I'm so glad we're doing this piece. We're so glad we're doing this, because I was having a conversation with my buddy. He and I had worked in that company, but the company leaders were like, yeah, we want to do some more things to make sure everybody has a great working atmosphere and so forth. So at the end of this was like after lunch, and, people are going back to work, but then it was just kind of like that lull, like that 2:30, 3 o'clock lull everybody faces. It's just human. It's going to happen. So they got us a Wii, and it was like super cool. So we could play the Wii to de-stress or to, have a good time. So we rounded up a bunch of folks, not, the whole company. It was a small organization, but we got some of the salespeople and a couple of folks from marketing, and, we were all in the break area for 10 to 15 minutes is what we planned to play a game of Wii bowling. But then as soon as we started and we were going and we were having fun, one of the sales leaders, she saw that we were playing and having fun and went down to the CEO wing and told the CEO and then came back and kiboshed the whole thing.
Oh boy.
Do you know what they said? They said, yes, we brought the Wii so that we can play, but you guys can play either before work or after work.
On your own time. Yep.
Wow. I was like, wow. And guess how many people touched it or played afterwards?
Oh, sure. Gather dust, I imagine.
It did. Nobody. It just sucked the life out of everything. But think about that. We can go back to our desk and sit down and go through that lull, or let's go do something a little bit exciting and invigorating for 15 minutes. I mean, smokers, I'm sorry to say this, smokers get a chance to go do a smoke break. Why can't we just do a healthy break? And I think it was that culture that was built was you can have fun. And growing a business and growing sales can't be fun. You need to be on the phones every single hour of the day. It really deflated. And I think that's goes to a testament what you're saying there. Like when you don't have the culture built from top, or when it's not clearly said, you have trouble. And that same manager, she in the past worked at a large tech company, and they had a issue where people could work from home, but she didn't really work. Some of them didn't work. So she assumed that if anyone worked from home, they were not going to work. Isn't that awful?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad you made that point, because I'd like to spin off that a little bit. I talk a little bit in the book about beware of the perk. And you just mentioned the example, two things that stuck out to me. You mentioned the example, there was a Wii there, and your usage of the Wii, came under scrutiny. And then also you mentioned tech. And there's something with perks. I'm going to try not to name businesses specifically, but, we think of like there's those sleep pods that I've read about in big tech, where you can pause and take a nap, and you can, pull this like sleep deprivation dome over your head, and you can kind of zone out for a little bit. Or in some big tech, it's like, if you're here past 9:00, we'll pay for your cab, or we'll buy you dinner, or we'll send a cleaning service to your home. And on paper, like, with the Wii sitting there, it looks good. It's like the business is looking out for me. But with the usage, you got hammered because you were playing it on business hours, God forbid. Or the thing is with these perks, they are designed to look good on paper, but in usage, very often there is something, I don't want to sound comic booky, there's something sinister about it. Because with the sleep pods and the laundry service, or we'll buy you a cab home or dinner, they are all designed to keep you at the office later, or to keep you working longer. And it's like, why should I go home? I can sleep in a sleep pod, and I'll get my meal bought for me, and I'll get a cab so I can go home at 10:00, and I'll be here again the next day at 7:00. And it's just they squeeze more hours out of someone, and still to marginalize someone and take their individuality away, and think of them more as a production line person who is just here to work and sacrifice their personal life for that. So we always have to be wary when there are perks like that. And, you had that gaming system sitting there, and the natural thing is to think, of course, why can't I take 15 minutes or a half hour and just blow off some steam? But then you got scrutinized for it and chastised for it. And it's just, we just have to raise an eyebrow and even like ask questions about if you're in the interview process. I was walking around on my way to the interview room, and I saw a Wii. Is that something, we can play with during the day? That's the point, to poke around and ask about these things and see do you get like a flop sweat response, or do you get like a passionate, absolutely, of course you can play with that during the day. It's not even a question. So,
the other thing too, one good point with that, you can also validate it with, if I could go back to that situation and it was in a scenario like that, I would validate it with other team members, find out anyone else on the team and ask them, so how do you guys, some of the things I see you guys play the Wii, have a Wii there. Do you guys play that? Or, kind of figure out what are the locals saying?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Dude, that's very interesting. A great point on that. What else do we need to be aware of? I wish we probably could talk for like another hour or so, but are there anything else that we could be aware of when it comes towards building that culture of empathy and, but still you'd have accountability?
Yeah, if I could spin it a little again from the, I just mentioned someone who is interviewing. I'd like to kind of put it from someone who is, trying to get a job in tech, or someone who's in sales and wants to get a job in an organization. It is a dialogue at that point in the interview process. I mentioned observation. You're in the space of an organization you want to work at, or a brand you want to be associated with. Keep your head on a swivel at that point. You mentioned there's a Wii, and you ask questions about that, but do you see people scurrying off to meeting rooms? And do you see people looking sullen about the space? Or are people, do you see people having casual conversations? Or is there laughter? Or are people crying? It's dramatic, but just keep your head on a swivel and be observant when you're in a space. And if there is something that is important to you, like pausing and blowing off steam with a we, or if working remotely is important to you, or if having that ability to take some time and do a little research online if you're in sales or tech or design and just look up something to better your craft. Can I do that? Is it okay if I can work at a coffee shop maybe a couple days a week? And if the person you're interviewing with says yes, then you drill in further and say, oh, that's great. Like, are there any I can't work at? Is there a time limit on things like that? That is the most important point as someone seeking out a job in any position, sales or what have you, to have that dialogue. You're not just there to be grilled when you're looking for a position. Really poke in on the culture and see, are things that are important to you validated? Are they supported? Like I mentioned something like a coffee shop, but you can even poke on the level of accountability in the organization. Or you can ask, can I talk to a client? Can I talk to someone who's left? Can I talk to someone who's been here? And really, I think if you're confident in your culture and you're championing that, you should be as confidently transparent as possible at that point.
Yeah, I like that. The other thought to that too, like something I've thought about before with some of the other organizations that I've worked with, was the like I wish I had asked questions about like stuff like that about the coffee shop. Because here's the key: if I can get the work done, and I've worked in other organizations that were like this, where if you got the work done, I don't care. I mean, you could go work on a moon for all I care. Just make sure that the work is done and you're helping out where you need to, and there are no issues. But if you're not doing that, then yeah, naturally there should be some accountability in it. But if you create the right culture, I imagine we shouldn't have too much of an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that is the most important point when you're seeking out a role, because once you've signed on the dotted line, I mean, then you're kind of, it's a little too late at that point. That is the point, really, to have that dialogue and have those transparent conversations. And the manner in which your questions are received, I'd say, is a huge indicator of the validity of the response, and also the passion with which someone is going to be. If someone is championing the culture at that point, their answer should just inspire you when they're articulating the response, because you'll find people who are passionate about culture, or people who are champions of it, or even in big tech now and big organizations, there are roles specifically with people who are charged with championing the culture, because it's a known quantity that you can't just let culture happen. Someone has to make sure that people feel supported all the time. And it's so easy for things to fall through the cracks if a big project is coming in or there's a sales deadline, to get in heads down mode and to forego all these things that make people feel like individuals and feel like coming into work. So really at that point, that dialogue, you mentioned you had wished you had asked, heck, me as well. I can say a lot in hindsight now, but if you're looking for a role, I mean, that's the point, to have that dialogue.
Yeah, dude, it's so darn true, man. If there's one major takeaway you'd like folks listening to this episode to walk away with, what's that one major takeaway or piece of advice? Respect
people, ultimately. It's beyond being a good person and being a good human being because it's the right thing to do. Respect and humility and empathy goes so far in the workplace. It permeates innovation. It permeates office dynamics. It permeates creativity. It permeates everything. Just that golden rule that we're taught as kids in our formative years: treat others the way you want to be treated. If we just can operate like that, again, beyond the feel-good nature of it, it permeates so many things at the business level and the profitability level and the quality of work level, because people feel empowered and supported, and like going into work is something that I actually want to do. So really just holding true to that and valuing the individual and what people bring to the table, that will take you and the team and the culture and the business just so very far.
Love it, man. If folks out there listening, they're curious about getting in touch with you, checking out your book or getting in touch with you, what's the best way for them to go about connecting with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the question. Two ways. On social media, my individual accounts on Twitter and what have you is at Pseudorum. That's PSEUDO Room. My personal portfolio site is pseudoroom.com. And then as far as my book, Cultivating a Creative Culture, _culture book is the way to find me online. And as of next year in 2020, I'll also be releasing the second edition of the book.
Dude, congratulations on that, man. We'll link back in the show notes to it. Appreciate you taking the time to come on the show and sharing your insights, and congrats on all the success you're doing, you're accomplishing, and just the way that you're going about helping our community. Appreciate it.
Oh, thanks very much, Donald. I appreciate the opportunity.
Anytime. Man, I'm telling you, Justin came, he saw, he delivered. If you haven't reached out to him yet, go ahead and do so. Find all the links in the show notes. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, just swipe up on a cover art. You'll see some notes below. We have an amazing team, does a fantastic job pulling that information, and you can connect with him. Personable guy, super down to earth and just chill. Or you can go to the show notes, thesalesevangelist.com/episode number 1143. Again, thesalesevangelist.com/episode number 1143. And while you're there, take advantage of the offer with Audible as well as TSE Certified Sales Training Program. We only bring you the best stuff, man. I would love for you to improve your skills and for your team to improve their skills as well. Again, find all the details at salesevangelist.com/episode number 1143. I share this with you because I want to help you. I care about sales. I'm passionate about sales. I was a sales rep that struggled. I was able to get the help, and now look at me. I started from the bottom, and now I'm here. I want to give you all the skills and knowledge that I've learned. Our goal here is to help you to find more ideal customers, build stronger value in your conversations, and ultimately close more deals. But most importantly is to challenge you to go out each and every single day and do big things. Hey, thank you so much for checking out the show today. I truly appreciate it. It was an absolute honor to have you. And if you haven't done so already, I ask that you go ahead and hit subscribe to the podcast. Show your friends, your colleagues, your neighbors, anyone that could benefit from a sales podcast, how they can subscribe as well. And you know what? My birthday's coming up next month in August. A cool gift would be a rating and review from you. You can go ahead and do so on Apple Podcasts. It would be truly appreciated. Our show today was produced by myself and the Sales Podcast Network. It was edited and mixed together by the one and only Jersh Nobel. Our content writer and show note creator is Mrs. Shannon Rasmussen. You can find audio credits to this and all of our episodes in the show notes. And as always, I am your host, your coach, your mentor, your guide down the sales journey, Mr. Donald C. Kelly, the Sales Evangelist. Sales Podcast Network.